Live free or die. It's a motto that New Hampshire voters take to heart.
I'm all over the place with my history.
I feel like I'm right in the middle.
A lot of people like me choose to remain unaffiliated.
New Hampshire holds the first presidential primary in the United States, but it can be notoriously hard to predict because the largest group of voters in the state isn't Democrat or Republican. It's voters who are registered but haven't declared a political party. New Hampshire is unique because those undeclared voters can choose to vote in either primary and make that choice right up until Election Day. They make up 42% of the electorate, but they're not a monolith. Not all undeclared voters are alike. So we followed 3 to find out where they stand.
Everybody assumes I'm a Democrat, right? Until they talk to me. And I explain why I'm not a Democrat.
Lisa Cote is an environmental scientist and a volunteer at her community radio station. She cares deeply about things like clean water and environmental regulation. You might think she'd be registered as a Democrat.
Tell me about when you left the Democratic Party.
It was the late 90s, and I felt very distant from what I saw as President Clinton's coziness with Wall Street, and that wasn't the kind of the FDR Democratic Party that I grew up with. So when I had the opportunity to register to vote and I could choose, I chose to not affiliate with either party. And I remember the registrar at that time saying, well, you young people, you don't commit to anything. Mm-hmm. And I said, when the Democrats start representing me, then I'll start representing them. Here in the state of New Hampshire, we're looking at needing to spend something on the order of $3 to $5 billion on drinking water and stormwater and wastewater infrastructure in the next 10 to 15 years. Mm-hmm. That's not being discussed.
So when you think about the field of candidates, are you leaning more towards someone like a Bernie Sanders who has backed a policy proposal like the Green New Deal, or who do you gravitate towards?
I was a Bernie volunteer in 2015. Hillary's platform did not appeal to me, and I thought we were gonna be stuck with the status quo. The way I like to explain it is, I drank the Obama lemonade, and I was still thirsty. Like, we didn't make the movements during the Obama years, particularly in the area of the environment, that I would have liked to see. And here was this great opportunity to kind of use that momentum to go forward. I've been following Bernie since he was a representative in Washington. On the other hand, for me, I'm a political junkie, and it comes down to who can beat Trump.
While Lisa leans left, she hasn't settled on which Democrat to vote for. On the other hand, Courtney Gifford feels differently. She's always voted Republican, but isn't sure that today's Republican Party really represents her anymore.
I feel like I'm right in the middle. So when I started voting in 2009, I have historically voted Republican. But I feel like 2019 is so different from when I first started voting. It just blows my mind that in the 21st century, a woman's right to choose is even up for discussion. I think that there are so many more issues in this country that can be talked about. Veterans being homeless, Flint, Michigan not having clean water. I just don't think that it's relevant. Women should have the right to choose what goes on in their bodies, and I don't really like the fact that they use it as a political gain to get votes.
Courtney is exactly the type of voter that some of the more moderate Democratic candidates might be able to win over.
I would say the one that I have been watching and really caught my eye would be Mayor Pete Buttigieg. I know he's young, but I feel like that's why I gravitated towards him first. I feel like he's very accomplished for someone that's 37, I believe he is. And I think that he just gets what the millennial and the Gen Z, what we're fighting for.
And there's a third type of undeclared voter I came across, one who's fed up with politics altogether.
I've become disgusted with the rancor in the system now. Everybody, both sides, just hurling insults at each other. There's nothing positive coming from either side that I can see, and I just didn't want to be affiliated with any of it anymore.
This is Russ Blanchett. He's an electronics technician. He's also voted Republican his whole life.
I voted for Donald Trump in the primary election. It was primarily as a protest vote, thinking that he wouldn't have any traction to get out of New Hampshire. It was Jeb Bush's year. The party kept telling us, Jeb. And I believe that, so as a protest vote, Trump.
But now he's put politics on mute.
It's the cumulative effect of all of the negativity for all of these years.
And you're still on Twitter, though.
Yeah. I have the ability to mute and block and tune out all the stuff that I'm not interested in on Twitter.
Have you watched any of the impeachment hearings?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Zero.
You haven't seen a single hearing?
You should see my muted words list on Twitter.
You've muted Nunes, Epstein, Biden, Trump, impeachment, impeached, everything else.
A lot.
A lot.
It keeps my feed sane.
So you potentially have zero news on impeachment?
Yes, that's the idea. I'm exhausted by this process. I've seen impeachment before. It's not pretty. I was very engaged in the news cycle for a very long time. It was a lot. I would go online, go to the political news sites, digest all the news of the day in minute detail. And my blood pressure was up, my health was down. It was an unhealthy thing for me, which is why I had to use the tools available for my own peace of mind, for my own well-being.
Do you think you're happier now?
Yes, I am. Without a doubt.
Russ doesn't want to vote for Trump again in 2020, but he's not sure there's a Democrat he can get behind either.
How do you see this field of Democratic candidates?
I don't see a strong contender. I don't see somebody who's got the presidential qualities to be a real leader.
There's not one person in the field that you think could be potentially presidential.
I have respect for Deval Patrick, but I need to see him in action more to make a decision on whether to support him or not.
If there was a Republican candidate that had some of those values that you are looking for that wasn't Trump, you would more likely vote for them than the current offerings in the Democratic field.
I believe so, yes.
Registered undeclared voters can wait till the very last minute to pick who they're voting for in New Hampshire, which makes predictions difficult. Andrew Smith is the director of surveys at the University of New Hampshire. He co-wrote a book on the New Hampshire primary back in 2015. I caught up with him after the debate.
I guess the way I would say is to not think of it as a voting block, but to think of it as three voting blocks. The undeclareds that are really Democrats, the undeclareds that are really Republicans, and then the undeclareds who aren't that interested in politics and probably won't vote in a primary. There's no reason for voters to make up their mind early. And I think that's really the thing that distinguishes New Hampshire from any of the other primary states or nomination contests anywhere, is that we have really high turnout. So turnout this year, my estimation is going to be 45 to 50%.
Hillary Clinton won New Hampshire in 2016 by 0.4%. That's less than 3,000 votes. It was the second closest state in the country. That's why, for both the primary and the general, these independent voters are going to be important.
Again, being an independent voter gives me the luxury of voting for whomever I think is the best candidate, regardless of party.
When do you think you'll make that decision?
Probably not until almost voting day. It may come down to a coin toss. Do I vote or do I sit this one out?
If you sit this primary out, if you sit the general out, this will be the first time you've sat out an election since you started even voting. You've never done it before.
Right.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.